Men love to hear certain words, words that echo deep inside their hearts, words that, when spoken, carry weight, affirmation, and validation, words that tell them they are seen, appreciated, and respected. These words, though simple, have the power to lift a man's spirit, to make him feel like he's truly valued. But here's the truth. Only 1% of women say them. And that's not because women don't care, not because they're indifferent. It's deeper than that. It's because we're all carrying our own baggage, our own fears, and sometimes we forget the impact of what's left unsaid. See, it's not just about saying something, it's about what those words stand for. When a man hears these words, it's like he's being given permission to feel. It's like a weight's lifted off his shoulders. But so many men go through life without hearing them, and that creates a void. They start to wonder, am I doing enough? Am I worthy? Does anyone truly see me? And that silence, it can break a person down, but it doesn't have to be this way. The thing is, society doesn't always give men the space to be vulnerable, to ask for what they need, to express their desires. They're taught to be strong, to be independent, to have it all together. And that can make it hard for them to speak up about something as simple as needing to hear a few words that validate their existence. And so, these words remain unspoken often when they matter the most. Relationships thrive on communication, not just on the big gestures or the flashy moments. No, it's the little things, the consistent, meaningful exchanges that make all the difference. If we're honest, when we don't say what we need to say, when we neglect the words that could make someone feel seen and heard, we're letting that relationship slip through the cracks. But it's not just on one side. Both men and women need to understand that connection doesn't just happen, it's built. Day by day, word by word. So here's the challenge. For every one of us, men, women, anyone who's in a relationship, let's be bold. Let's stop waiting for someone else to make the first move. Let's step forward and say the words that matter, even when they're hard. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about love. It's about respect, acknowledgement, and the courage to express what truly matters. Let's be the ones who change the narrative. Let's make sure that when someone needs to hear it, they hear it loud and clear. Words have power, immense power. The kind of power that can build bridges between hearts or tear them down. The right words at the right time have the ability to shape someone's day, their mindset, their life. It's not just what is said, but how it's said, the tone, the intent behind it. For a man, hearing those words can be a lifeline. It can be a moment of validation in a world where often he feels like he's out there fighting battles alone, doing everything he can to measure up, to be enough. When a man hears the right words that make him feel appreciated, respected, love, something inside him clicks. It's not just flattery. It's genuine acknowledgement of his efforts, his value. It can be the reassurance he needs to continue pushing forward, even on days when he feels like giving up. These words aren't just nice to hear, they're essential for his emotional well-being, for his sense of self-worth. Men, like all human beings, long for connection. They want to know that the person by their side sees them not just for what they do, but for who they are. And when those words come, when they hear, I see you, I appreciate you, I value you, it's like the world shifts for a moment. It's a feeling of belonging, of being known, and it fills up the empty spaces that we often don't even realize exist. This is why words are so powerful. They can speak to the soul, to a place that's deeper than any surface-level conversation. Words can make someone feel like they matter, like they are not invisible in a world that demands so much of them. And in that moment when the right words are spoken, it's like everything makes sense. It reaffirms who he is and why he does what he does. The weight of the world, even if just for a second, becomes a little lighter. But here's the thing. Words are not just sounds. They carry emotions, intentions, and connections. For a man, hearing the right words means more than just hearing them, it means feeling them. It's the understanding behind those words, the depth of them. When they are sincere, when they are heartfelt, those words become an anchor in a sea of uncertainties. They carry the power to ground him, to remind him that he is enough. So when we speak these words, we're not just offering a compliment, we're offering something that can change the course of someone's day, maybe even their life. The statement that only 1% of women say the words that men long to hear is a powerful one. And it's not just about a lack of effort or affection. It reflects something much deeper about human connection and communication. We often think of these words as something trivial, something that can easily be said without much thought. But the truth is, the weight of what those words represent is not always fully understood. These words aren't just about making someone feel good. In the moment, they reflect a deeper need for recognition, for affirmation, for understanding. They speak to the longing to feel truly seen by another person, especially when life can often make us feel invisible or like we're just going through the motions. The challenge isn't in finding the right words to say, it's in recognizing their significance. Men may want to hear them, but often it's not just about hearing them in passing, it's about feeling them, experiencing them as something genuine. For many men, these words are more than just a compliment, they're a signal of emotional safety, of vulnerability being met with acceptance. It's a way of saying, I see you for who you are, not just for what you do. It's not just a pat on the back, it's a recognition of a man's humanity, his struggles, and his efforts that so often go unnoticed. But despite how much these words are needed, they are rarely spoken. Why? Perhaps it's because women, just like men, often carry their own struggles, fears, and doubts. Perhaps there's a disconnect between how men express their needs and how women interpret those needs. We can all too easily get wrapped up in the hustle of life, trying to juggle responsibilities, meet expectations, or keep up with the daily grind. In this rush, it's easy to forget how important those few words are, or we might take them for granted. We assume that actions speak louder than words, but sometimes the right words can speak louder than any action ever could. Furthermore, societal expectations play a role. Men are often expected to be strong, independent, and self-sufficient. So it's not always easy for them to ask for or even express their need for affirmation. And on the other side, women might not always recognize the depth of this need. It might seem unnecessary or even awkward to say something that feels so emotionally vulnerable. So, the result is that this need goes unspoken, and the words that could make all the difference are left unsaid, leaving both parties feeling like something's missing. This disconnect isn't a reflection of a lack of love or affection, it's just a gap in understanding, in communication. It's a gap that, if bridged, could transform relationships, making them deeper, more meaningful, and more connected. If only those few words, those few simple words that men long to hear were spoken more often, they could offer a sense of emotional reassurance that both partners may not even realize they need. And that's why it's so significant that only a small percentage of women say these words, because they represent something beyond words themselves. They represent emotional safety, trust, and deep connection. And when those things are rare, they become even more valuable. The gap between what men long to hear and how rarely they actually hear it is striking, and it speaks volumes about the complexities of relationships and human communication. It's not that men don't want to hear certain words, they desperately do. It's not a matter of wanting constant praise or being fed compliments for the sake of ego. No, it's deeper than that. What men crave is emotional recognition, a sense of understanding that transcends the surface. It's about feeling seen and valued beyond what they can produce or achieve. But the frequency with which these words are spoken is far less than the need for them. And this creates a kind of emotional silence. When you stop and think about it, it's easy to see why. Relationships are complicated. Both partners come with their own set of expectations, insecurities, and communication styles, and often we don't fully understand the needs of the other person. For men, there can be an emotional vulnerability attached to expressing their desire to hear words of affirmation. But society has taught them to suppress that vulnerability. They're told to be strong, to handle things on their own, to not need validation in the way that others might. So many men carry this need for affirmation quietly, often not knowing how to ask for it or even admit they need it. On the flip side, women may not always know just how deeply these words matter. There may be a disconnect because, from their perspective, actions often speak louder than words. Maybe they feel like they show their appreciation through their actions, cooking a meal, taking care of responsibilities, providing support. But the problem is that these actions, while important, don't always communicate the emotional depth that words can. Men may appreciate those actions, but they also need to hear that their efforts are acknowledged on a deeper, more personal level. And when those words aren't spoken, it can lead to feelings of being unnoticed, unappreciated, or even invisible. It's not just about saying something nice, it's about truly hearing someone and making them feel understood. The fact that these words are not commonly spoken often leaves both parties feeling disconnected. For the man, it's the longing for a deeper emotional bond, for something more than the transactional aspects of a relationship. And for the woman, it's the potential lack of awareness of how significant a simple statement can be. This gap, where a desire goes unmet, creates distance where there should be closeness. It's a subtle, yet powerful, strain on the relationship that, if left unaddressed, can build up over time. In many cases, both sides want the same thing: understanding, emotional connection, validation. But they often miss the mark because they don't know how to express what they need. Men may not always have the tools to ask for what they long to hear. And women may not always know that something as simple as a few heartfelt words could make all the difference. This is where the power of open communication comes in. If both sides were more aware of how much these words mean, they could begin to close this gap, creating a space where both feel seen, heard, and valued. Until then, that disconnect between what men need and what they actually hear will continue to quietly undermine the connection that's meant to exist in relationships. Vulnerability is often seen as a weakness, but it's one of the most powerful tools for building trust and emotional connection. For many men, hearing certain words isn't just about a compliment or a reassurance in the moment. It's about creating a space where they can be vulnerable without fear of judgment, a space where they can let down their guard and show who they truly are. Unfortunately, vulnerability is something men are rarely taught to embrace. In many cultures, they're encouraged to hide their emotions, to present an image of strength and stoicism. Vulnerability becomes a form of emotional risk, something that feels dangerous or unmanly to express. But here's the thing: in relationships, vulnerability is a cornerstone of true intimacy. When a man hears those words he craves, something profound happens. It's as if, for a brief moment, all the walls he's built up come down. He allows himself to trust that the person speaking those words sees him for who he truly is, flaws and all. It's a gift, really the gift of emotional safety. And that safety is rare in a world where so much of what men experience is about proving their worth or constantly performing to meet expectations. When that emotional safety is offered through words, it gives men permission to be vulnerable without feeling exposed. It says you don't have to be perfect, you don't have to have it all together, and you don't have to carry the weight of the world alone. You're enough just as you are. This type of affirmation is deeply needed because it's a rare acknowledgement that he doesn't have to keep pretending. Men are often pressured to bottle things up, to be the rock, to be the problem solver. But deep down, they need space to express their feelings, their insecurities, and their struggles just as much as anyone else. Without those words, without that reassurance, vulnerability remains an emotional risk they may never take. The fear of being misunderstood or dismissed can make men hesitant to express themselves fully. It's easy to close off when you're never given the space to open up, but when the right words are spoken, it creates a shift. Vulnerability no longer feels like an exposure, but an invitation to be seen in a way that is affirming and nurturing. It's the kind of vulnerability that strengthens, that builds trust, and deepens the connection between two people. What's crucial here is the understanding that vulnerability isn't just about sharing your darkest secrets or deepest fears. It's also about acknowledging that sometimes the simple act of being seen and heard is enough. Those words that men long to hear aren't just about saying something to boost their ego. They are the keys that unlock a deeper connection. And when a man hears those words, it's as if he's finally been given permission to let his guard down and be who he truly is. That's what vulnerability is all about. Allowing yourself to be fully human and knowing that the person beside you is ready to accept you imperfections and all. When we talk about the importance of relationships, we often focus on the big moments, the anniversaries, the celebrations, the milestones. But the true foundation of any strong relationship isn't built on grand gestures alone. It's built on the everyday exchanges, the quiet acts of understanding and respect. The words we choose, the way we communicate, and the way we make each other feel on a day-to-day basis are what truly shape the connection. If there's one thing that can either make or break a relationship, it's how well both people are able to express their needs and understand each other's desires. The ability to communicate openly about what's important, to express vulnerability without fear of being judged, is essential to building a relationship that goes beyond surface-level connection. In the context of a relationship where men long to hear certain words, it's clear that communication is key. The disconnect between what men want and what they actually hear reflects a failure in communication, one that goes both ways. It's not just about men needing to hear these affirming words, but also about women needing to understand how important these words are for their partners. When both sides aren't in tune with what the other person values, it creates an emotional distance, even if both individuals genuinely care for each other. The absence of those few words isn't just about what's not being said. It's about what's left unsaid, about the things that get lost in translation because neither person feels safe enough to ask for what they need. This gap can lead to frustration, misunderstanding, and even resentment. If men feel like their emotional needs aren't being met, they may start to pull away, not because they don't care, but because they feel like they're not being understood. Likewise, women may feel they're doing everything right, showing love through actions, offering support, and yet still feel that something is missing. It's not that either partner is wrong or doesn't care. It's that the emotional needs of each person haven't been clearly communicated. Relationships require constant effort to maintain understanding, and without that, things can start to fall apart in small, unnoticed ways. When we talk about relationships thriving on communication, it's not just about talking more, it's about talking about the right things. It's about checking in with each other, not just on the surface level, but on the deeper emotional plane. For a man to feel truly connected in a relationship, he needs to know that he's being heard, that his efforts are acknowledged, and that his vulnerabilities are accepted. And for a woman, recognizing the significance of these words means creating space for deeper conversation zones that go beyond the everyday hustle and dive into what's truly meaningful for both parties. A relationship without open communication is like a house built on sand. No matter how strong the foundation may seem at first, it won't stand the test of time if it isn't reinforced by mutual understanding. When we fail to recognize the importance of saying the right things, we risk losing that connection. But when we make the effort to truly communicate, to speak the words that need to be spoken, we are laying the groundwork for something that's truly lasting. In a world where life moves fast, where expectations can be overwhelming, the strength of a relationship lies in its ability to slow down and listen to, truly hear what each person needs, to acknowledge it, and to act on it with sincerity and love. That's how relationships thrive. The challenge, as always, lies in the willingness to take the first step. Too often, we find ourselves waiting for the other person to make the change, to speak the words, to offer the affirmation. We wait for the perfect moment, or we convince ourselves that the other person should be the one to initiate. But what if instead of waiting, we all took the responsibility to act first? What if we stopped assuming that others should know what we need and instead made the bold choice to step forward and express ourselves clearly and honestly? We have to realize that the gap in communication, the distance between what is desired and what is received, doesn't have to remain. It's easy to fall into patterns where we accept things as they are, even when they're not fulfilling us the way we need them to. We grow comfortable in the silence. Or worse, we convince ourselves that our needs don't matter enough to be spoken out loud. But the truth is, it takes courage to change the narrative. It takes courage to be the one who brings something to the table that might feel uncomfortable or difficult, but is necessary for growth. The simple act of speaking the words that matter is a small but significant revolution in a relationship. It's a step toward not only giving the other person what they need, but also taking ownership of your own emotional needs. When you stop waiting for someone else to offer what you crave and instead start voicing it, you invite the kind of authentic dialogue that fosters real connection. If we all took that step, if everyone made the conscious effort to say what matters, whether it's words of affirmation, vulnerability, or deeper emotional truth, relationships would change. They would become more authentic, more raw, and more meaningful. This is where the real shift happens. When we stop playing the waiting game and choose to lead by example, it's not just about love in theory, it's about love in action. It's about being brave enough to say, I need this. I value this. I want you to know that I see you and appreciate you. The act of initiating this change doesn't just benefit the one receiving the affirmation, it strengthens both individuals. It creates an environment where both partners are allowed to be themselves, to ask for what they need, and to receive it without fear of judgment. And when you both step up, the relationship transforms into something more resilient, more trusting, and more aligned with the emotional needs of both people. Too often, we underestimate the power of what a few simple words can do. We don't realize that by withholding them, we're doing a disservice not only to ourselves, but to the other person as well. We rob ourselves of deeper connection of richer moments, and we rob our partners of the emotional safety they're also seeking. If we don't take the initiative, if we don't speak the words, the silence will continue. But when we do, when we choose to bridge that gap by speaking our truth and saying what's needed, we create the kind of relationship that isn't just surviving, it's thriving. And that, my friends, is how we can change the entire dynamic, not just in our own lives, but in the lives of everyone around us. In the end, it all comes down to a simple but powerful truth. Words matter. The right words, spoken at the right time, have the power to transform a relationship, to build bridges where there was once distance, and to create an emotional connection that is strong and lasting. Men long to hear these words, not because they need constant validation, but because they seek to feel seen, valued, and understood in a world that often pushes them to hide their vulnerabilities. And yet, only a small percentage of women say them, often because of the pressures and misunderstandings that shape communication in relationships. The good news is that this gap can be bridged. It starts with us. We have the ability to take the first step, to speak the words that truly matter, and create the emotional space where both partners can thrive. When we stop waiting for the other person to make the move, when we find the courage to express what's needed, we open the door to deeper understanding, greater connection, and more meaningful relationships. It's not just about love. It's about respect, acknowledgement, and the willingness to make the other person feel seen. So let's make the change. Let's not wait for someone else to make the first move. Let's speak the words that matter, build the connections that last, and change the narrative for the better. Because in the end, it's not just about hearing the words, it's about truly feeling them, and that's what will make all the difference.